you first found out that you'd been accused, okay, I think we start with Sylvia first, because we've not heard so much from you, Sylvia. When you first heard that you were accused, what was your initial reaction?
I just laughed. Dennis was accused as well, and he showed me this document that said that Anne had accused him, and he kept saying, read on, read on. And then I saw my name, and I just laughed out loud. There was nothing else to do. It was just ridiculous. Absolutely.
At the time, did you think it would escalate into what it has?
Absolutely not. And there was nothing heard for the next 10 years. This was 13 years ago then. So I didn't hear again till 3 years ago, when all this letters came round all my neighbourhood, our neighbourhood. Yeah.
Now, do any of you know how Robert Green initially got involved with this case?
Yeah, he was speaking. He was making a speech concerning his travel agency or corruption in the travel agency, because he used to run his own travel agency. He used to have a partner, and Stuart Usher saw him and asked if he would be prepared to take on the case of Anne Greig. So that's how Robert got involved with Stuart Usher.
All right, Stuart Usher. Now, how was he connected to the case?
He was
Stuart Usher ran against crooked lawyers.
Yes, that's right.
A website in Scotland at the time, Scotland Against Crooked Lawyers, and Anne approached him with her story, and he didn't feel that he could do so much about it, or except one member of his group did get a settlement for Anne of I think it was something in excess of £40,000, and so he had a wee bit of success for her there, but then he got Robert Green as an independent investigator, passed the whole case over to him. Now Robert started, I mean, one of the things that Robert didn't do was, and he said he was doing, was investigating it, but he didn't do any investigation at all. In fact, he'd never even been to Aberdeen at all until he went up and he was arrested that first time. So he when he says he's an investigator, I cannot agree with him. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, it was on. I understand that the actual show's been taken down now. One of the Ford Rockton shows, and they were talking about the post-mortem, and also the sheriff's sister came up as well, because it was just after the Mark Daly from the BBC had phoned in, and Robert and Mark had a bit of a confrontation on there, and it showed there that nobody investigated anything, because it was that day that Stuart Usher actually admitted that he'd never even seen the autopsy report. So he was going on word of mouth, hearsay, as to what the autopsy report said. He was, making statements about it, and then he had to admit that he had only seen it that morning, and it didn't say what Anne and Robert said it had. Yeah, and also, to do with Evelyn Buchanan, they swapped it. Oh, well, it wasn't the sister, it must have been the sister-in-law. And how did Stuart Usher find that out? He phoned Anne, and Anne said, well, my friend told me, so, we just took it in good faith.
Now we're actually going to issue a challenge here, because you actually don't have to believe anything that we say tonight, or any of the evidence that we're going to present to you tonight. But I'm actually sitting, looking at a copy of the autopsy report now, and I can tell you it does not say what Anne and Robert have claimed publicly in interviews that it does. Now, you don't have to believe me. You can ask Stuart Usher this, because he, on this programme just mentioned, confirmed it doesn't say what they claim it does. Now, I'm not going to read any of this out because I think it's personal and private information, but if they want to argue that I'm lying, they only have to do one thing: show the autopsy report.
Can I just say, this is obviously the autopsy for Anne's brother?
Yes, this is for Anne's brother.
So tell us what it actually says, if you've got it there. if you
There was
can.
no
Do you want me to summarise, or do you
Yeah,
want me to talk
summarise.
technical? Because I really would not feel comfortable
Summarise.
going into a lot of the details.
Yeah.
I can, actually, this will verify that I'm telling the truth, because on the Mark Daly show, he mentioned about a contusion on the head. Now, I have searched this autopsy report and there is only one mention of contusion, and it doesn't appear on the head. It was something to do with the lungs, but I am nowhere wouldn't even pretend to know anything about a medical diagnosis in an autopsy, but having read what the wording was, it was something to do with the lungs. But basically, we know that the brother died as a result of an attempted suicide, that he did have a liquid in his stomach that was alcohol that had been consumed within 20 minutes before the death, that the injuries sustained were consistent with attempts to resuscitate him, and you have to bear in mind it was not just the person that found him who they have accused of actually murdering him. And let's think about it this way. If, as their conspiracy theory goes, this person wanted to kill the brother, why not just leaving him a burning car? Why try and save him? But anyway, regardless of that, there is no beaten to death, which is what Robert Green has claimed before, that he was basically black and blue all over from having been beaten and thrown unconscious into a car. The injuries sustained are consistent with being taken from a car that was burning. There was carbon monoxide in his body, which was consistent with the attempted suicide from a pipe that went from the exhaust into the car. There was cyanide poisoning, which was coming from the car engine fire, which was a very common fault also with catalytic converters in those days. If you actually investigate that, you'll see it was a common cause of fire in cars. And as I said, the alcohol that he consumed, and again, this brings into account an interview that Anne gave where she's categorically stated he never touched whiskey. He hated whiskey, he never touched it at all. And 5 minutes later she said yes, he had the occasional drink of whiskey. But anyway, it does not state in the autopsy it was whiskey, but it does state, I can tell you how much alcohol,
Yes.
if you like. Samples of blood and urine and stomach contents were submitted to the Department of Clinical Biochemistry, Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, for toxicological analysis. A copy of a report prepared for the Procurator Fiscal discloses a blood alcohol level of 215 milligrams stroke 100 millilitres and a urine alcohol level of 204 milligrams stroke 100 millilitres. A blood cyanide level of 2.9 milligrams stroke 1 was recorded, and the blood was 57% saturated with carbon monoxide. Screening of the urine and stomach contents for the presence of a variety of drugs proved negative. I'm reading from the very last part of the last paragraph, which now states, at the time of his death he was considerably under the influence of alcohol, and the relative values of blood and urine alcohol indicate he was